didn't matter that I was singing out of tune or I couldn't hit a note, or I was just so in touch with my emotions and giving it a sound.
I'm Heather Grish, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrish.com or on Instagram at heathergrish. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. Our voices are a pathway to connect us with other individuals. And when we feel like we cannot express ourselves the way we like, this can really take a physical, mental, and an emotional toll. Whether it's being afraid to speak or even sing, or possibly even saying things that we later regret, we will end up feeling disconnected from our own authentic self. But what if there was a way to unblock that lump in the throat or stop the cat from getting our tongue and feel shamelessly free, connected, and whole again? My guest today helps people go on a healing vocal journey. I think you'll find her work intriguing, and I hope you'll check out both her therapeutic offerings as well as the beautiful music she's put out into the world. You're listening to the Wisdom of the Body. Today, I'm here with Nessi Gomes, who's a musician and a voice therapist. She was born on the tiny island of Guernsey in the UK, and then singing and music became her way of dealing with challenging life circumstances. From a young age, she discovered the ability to transform discomforts and unspoken emotions by exploring sound, and has continued to root herself more and more in the therapeutic value of music and expression. In 2016, Nessi released her debut album, Diamonds and Demons, and since then toured in more than 30 countries, sharing her music on major stages as well as her Vocal Odyssey, voice exploration workshops, and retreats. Nessi holds a BA in Creative Expressive Therapies and Music, and she also has a diploma in Group Voice Therapy. Thank you so much for joining us on the Wisdom of the Body, Nessi.
Thank you for having me, Heather.
I recently discovered your work and got so excited to meet you and talk about how you help individuals connect with their voice. And I love this idea of, in your bio, the transforming the discomforts and the unspoken emotions by exploring sound. It sounds like there's a lot here that we could talk about.
Yeah.
And I'd love to learn a little bit about, first of all, your Vocal Odyssey, maybe starting there, and the voice exploration workshops and retreats that you do with people. Could you tell us a little bit about that work that you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. So these workshops and retreats it's really about creating a safe container for individuals to really kind of meet their most intimate part of themselves, which I would confidently say that's our voice. And it's not a place where I'm training people to become singers or professional or improving technique. Of course, there are elements within the work that could help to support the voice, but really to give space for those that are dealing with different kind of experiences around their voice. Maybe people, they come because they're really longing to meet that part of themselves through, whether it's through speaking or through expression. And so, these workshops have been kind of carefully designed to really allow that process to unfold and for people to dive in and really meet parts of themselves through sound, through their voice. Naturally, you get a handful of people that come that want to improve their voice or learn how to sing. But I think what they quickly kind of realized towards the end of that process is actually they came to sing to learn or sound to learn about themselves. The voice, I would say, is when we're really connecting to our sound. It's not so much about our voice, it's more about our relationship to ourselves, and that gets really mirrored through our expression, whether it's through speaking or sounding. So there's different elements within those workshops and retreats. It's very playful also, but it also has kind of a spiritual element to it. There's improvisation involved, but it's not about performing. It's not about coming there to impress yourself or the group. It's really just to bring your vulnerability and your sincerity to the space. Yeah, and that can be quite a delicate process because people come with all sorts of maybe trauma around their expression. Maybe they grew up in family households where they felt quite silenced. They felt that they had a place to really speak their truth, or they felt like they were too much. From a very young age, we've all kind of experienced a certain level of where we feel like our expression has been edited, right? From maybe your family members saying, be quiet, or shushing you, or you feel that, remembering that time where you felt ridiculed, where you were singing or sounding. So we all carry this from different structures within society. And it's kind of really just peeling back those layers and diving a bit deeper and connecting more to our soul, our essence through that.
Yeah, it really feels like there's so many ways that this could manifest as well. The ways that we've been inhibited in our environments from using our voice. And like you said, from the various traumas that happened to us, or just experiences that we felt our energy blocked within, right? And people, I would imagine there's stuttering problems, there's people who just aren't speaking, and then there's issues like, you're more of an expert on this than me, but I'm just sort of thinking of some of the, maybe even the experiences that I've had. I know I have a podcast and I've done public speaking for many years, but I wasn't always a very good speaker, and I'm always trying to improve. One of the things I noticed about myself actually was that I had a voice and I wasn't afraid to speak, but well, sometimes I was. But what was a bigger problem for me as an individual was finding my own voice rather than letting someone else's voice come through me. And
Yeah.
it's so weird because I learned a little bit about that from studying yoga. And when I was teaching yoga, I would listen to myself teaching yoga and I would say, that's not my voice. That's that dude in India who taught me. That's his voice
Yeah.
coming through me. It was so interesting. So it kind of freaked me out. Actually, this was probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And I really went on this like quest to find my voice, but I didn't have a teacher like you. And I wish I did, because I think I would have gone even deeper into it. What are some of the ways that you help people? Because you were saying it's not about performing.
No.
It's really about connecting internally. Can you talk about the difference between that?
Well, I'm a musician and I also do this work alongside. And I think there is a tendency sometimes when people are in that space, they feel like they do need to perform part of themselves. And that can bring a lot of anxiety if we're having to go through something, I don't know, where somebody's coming to the center of the circle and they're kind of improvising in the moment. And it can bring up a lot of fear around performing and needing to impress. Whereas I really encourage people to really use that space to express what is there in the moment, and that the outer circle are there to hold space and to witness rather than to judge. And of course, we all have judgments, whether it's judgments about ourselves through the process or others. It's really just creating that container where we can really watch our thoughts and really watch our process as that unfolds. I think it depends also on the alchemy of the group as well. That it's sometimes, for me at least, the most profound moments is not necessarily just me sounding myself. It's witnessing somebody else step into their power and giving voice to those parts that they might have silenced. And sometimes that sound can be really primal. So it's not necessarily about sounding beautiful or trying to get it right. It's really making space and giving way to those sounds that are really quite right into our core. So it's, I think that's another element of the work, is kind of moving away from this idea of what it should sound like or how we should express ourselves through our voice. Getting in touch with it first by feeling it, feeling what it is that we want to connect with, whether it's a memory or an emotion or it's a physical sensation, and then guiding that process so that they start to kind of either begin by giving it a movement and then from there giving it a voice. So dropping any kind of premeditated melodies or anything like that, really just listening to the moment and to the simplicity of that moment. And it can be so scary for so many of us because I think when we do step into that space, it's like a little death. It's surrendering into that void and giving your totality at the same time.
Well, I love what you brought up, about the primal aspect. And as humans, we have that sort of primal being. We think we're, these intellectual beings, but we still have the primal being as we all discover when we have children, which I know you have a young daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have a son. And it feels like that time of our life where we are going into becoming a mother, a lot of that stuff really comes up. It certainly did for me, and kind of organically started playing, like just on my yoga mat in the morning, started playing with my voice and experimenting with my voice. And I think I mentioned to you that there's a singer who you remind me of who I love so much, and her name is Lisa Gerard. And I've never met her. I would have loved to have had her as a teacher, but she did the Gladiator soundtrack. So a lot of people know her from that.
Mm-hmm.
And she was in a band in the 90s called Dead Can Dance. And I would watch videos of her talking about singing and listen to her sing. And she actually sings in a made up language.
Mm. Yeah.
She doesn't sing in an actual language. And she said that when she was 12, she started singing in what she called the language of the heart. And you'll be listening to her in a movie and you'll think, oh, she's speaking Hebrew or she's speaking some ancient language that you don't know. And then you realize that no, she's just made it up. And I love that because for me, when I explored it, sort of allowed me to get my mind out of the way.
Yeah.
Because language does that. Language, right?
Exactly.
So how do you, when you help people tap into the primal, is it more the kind of the root sounds of the words that you're trying to get people to connect with?
Well, I think it's very much like that in the sense that I rarely use words in the work that we do. It's really about just kind of, exploring the elements of, I don't know, creature language or vowel sounds, just open vowel sounds. Because I do feel that sometimes once we start to bring words into the story, we can sometimes get a bit too attached or it can block us. I mean, that's my experience. And it's not to say that I don't ever use words, but primarily we tend to work in that way where it's not bringing words into the workshop. It's really about exploring free flow of sound, and maybe we'll explore that through gibberish or made up language, which can be really hard for people as well. That's also not always easy for some people. But I find that that's a really useful way to kind of dissolve the ego state. But a lot of playfulness, really. Playfulness is really the key. We can get so serious in these things. I think, we can learn a lot from children. And, that's one of the things I love with my daughter is really observing how she forms language and how she kind of babbles to herself. And it's really inspiring and such a beautiful journey to see her on. So I kind of take that inspiration also into the work that I'm doing with people.
We didn't get a chance to talk yet about the voice during birth,
Oh,
and it could be
yeah.
a whole separate discussion. I know that because you have a daughter, and a lot of the work that I did around fertility, my own fertility prior to conceiving a child, the voice was definitely a piece of it for me.
Yeah.
But also during birth and going through labor, there was a lot happening there with the voice as well that was very primal. What were some of the things that you learned in that process?
Well, I think what I realized is if I was kind of holding any tension in my jaw or like not releasing the sound, like holding on, then this would really kind of interfere with the process. I read also somewhere that the voice, the throat is so connected to the vagina, and if that's relaxed, then they're just so connected in that way. So I noticed that in my birth as well, especially through the contractions, that actually the more I was able to make the sound and connect to the sound, the more I felt more connected also to what was happening down below for myself.
My partner still likes to talk about the noises that I was making as I went into labor.
Yeah.
It's like an epic conversation.
Yeah.
Epic sounds. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we have animals outside, and I always find it amazing that we think we're so smart, but whenever there's something dangerous going on in an environment, it seems like the animals always know it first. So are we really that smart? We have certain kind of smarts, I guess. And the fact that each animal sort of has its own sound that resonates differently through its
Mm.
body, and that people all sound so different.
Mm-hmm.
And certain people have high pitched voices, certain people have low pitched voices. And obviously, our voices have different qualities to them.
Mm-hmm.
So some of them sound a little raspy. Some of them sound, I have a friend who I always tell his voice sounds like honey.
Mm-hmm.
And when people are, I say that, I personally had a hard time identifying what my voice was. I think I would hear a song on the radio and I would try to sound like that singer
Mm-hmm.
in that
Mm-hmm.
song because I was very good at doing impressions, which seemed like an interesting skill, but it's not a very embodied, authentic experience.
Mm.
And what do you notice happens for people? What are some of the little nuances that you notice happens for people when they have found their unique, authentic voice?
A lot of emotion can be released. People, I don't know, it's such a powerful kind of container, and it's witnessing that liberation in that moment. And, that could just be the beginning of their journey, not necessarily that they found their voice in that moment, or in a 2-day or 1-week retreat. It's concluded, yeah, I found my voice, but you just see that seed has been planted, and there's this kind of new relationship that they have with themselves, and maybe there's a lot of tears. There's just this, sometimes people are like shaking. They have that moment where they've really made that direct connection through their voice, because at least the way I experience it, because all this is just what I'm sharing with people in the group is, I guess, my own journey of how I kind of connected to my voice. And it's like I said before, I think, in some ways it's not even about our voice, it's our relationship to ourselves. The voice is a mirror, it's a portal. And once the mind is out of the way and it's been softened through the process of various tools that we've gone through, and you start to see that flow happening, it's really kind of connecting to something bigger than yourself. And when I started to explore voice work, I was very young. I was, I guess, 14, 15, and I was suffering a lot from depression, and I didn't really grow up in an environment where I could freely speak about what I was experiencing as a young girl, or in my family, things were very much pushed under the carpet. We didn't talk about our emotions. We didn't rock the boat. Everything was very much about keeping up appearances to some degree. And this just created a really toxic environment for myself because I had no outlet. I had no one to communicate what was going on for me. And it was, I guess, I don't know if by coincidence, but I started to explore by playing an instrument. My auntie had a piano in her house, and every time I would go there, I would just improvise on the piano, and I would just create sounds in the moment. Maybe it had some words, but often it was just random sounds. And for me, this was the medicine. I think that contributed a lot to my healing process. I did talking therapy. I did, I was on medication, all that stuff. And I didn't feel that really helped me at all, maybe to a certain extent. I had nowhere to go with it. And what I found with the voice work, that exploration through my voice, was that it just collected all those pieces and it started to make me feel whole again. It didn't matter that I was singing out of tune or I couldn't hit a note, or I was just so in touch with my emotions and giving it a sound. And I think maybe we've grown up, like I said before, throughout society thinking, oh, I'm either talented or I'm gifted or I'm not creative enough. And it's got nothing to do about with those things. It's really, for me, I just want to pass on my own journey to others to give them that opportunity to really meet themselves. I feel like that's the nature of this work, is really meeting yourself. It's not really even meeting your voice. It's, your voice is obviously an element there. That's the bridge, but it's really meeting deep layers of your essence and learning about yourself. And I think that's what singing and sounding and doing voice work did for me. It helped me get to know parts of myself. It helped me feel more confident in who I was. And I was a bit like that as well. You know, when I was younger, I went through that stage of imitating, and maybe my first few years, I didn't really feel like I properly locked into my own sound, my own expression. And that really came some years later when I was studying music therapy. You know, I was working with a lot of improvisation, and through that process, through that journey, I was able to start feeling into what was mine a bit more and picking up inspiration, of course. I think it's a natural process as well, maybe to imitate how we pick up maybe different techniques or tools. But within a group setting, it's sometimes hard to put into words. But when I watch that process, when I see individuals, it's really powerful because we all become one in that moment. And when we're witnessing one another through that very vulnerable process, it gives you life. It makes, you know, you almost see them come alive, and they take away so much from whether it's a weekend journey or a 1 week journey. And yeah, it gives a new kind of burst of life in a way.
If you want to create a more receptive body, free from toxins, inflammation, and metabolic issues, would it be crazy for you to explore booking an Ayurvedic consultation with me? There's probably never been a more perfect time to do it. Every day you wait matters when it comes to your health. So if you're ready to get your body back in balance, I'll give you a 30-day plan to get you started. Go to heathergrish.com to book a consultation. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. I remember hearing that, I don't know if this is true, I haven't actually seen the data on it, but I've heard that singers, when a group of people sing together, that their heartbeats will match up.
Yeah.
When they're harmonizing specifically. And I don't know, do you have any sense of physiological shifts that happen within the group as people are singing together?
Yeah, there is. There are definitely, no, like people feel more empathetic towards one another. You feel something really close within the group, and it definitely creates harmony. Of course, there's moments where people are feeling disconnected, and, you know, they might be getting quite triggered by the process, which is really also extremely welcome. But you start to see people more relaxed. Maybe they come into the space, started off really tense in their body, and you can see it in their posture. And as we start to kind of work through the work together, everything just kind of softens. And I notice it for myself, but then I find my flow as well. It's equally quite a thing to hold that kind of space. And, you know, I notice that once we've dropped into that space, then everything feels like there's more flow. And yeah, you see it physically on people, and people are releasing. Also, they might be releasing through laughter, or they're crying, and there's a real sense of unionship in that process. People really come together, and they're very supportive. It's always been such a loving group, the way people come together and hold one another through that.
It feels like there's such a widespread problem of people not having safety to express their emotions, which no one is, I believe, doing intentionally. It seems, whether it's culture of society or a work culture that an individual grows up in, or a family culture, or just there being that sort of sense that we all have to power and, power our way through the day to get everything done, and
Mm.
sort of neglect what we're really feeling inside our bodies. And I used to work in the corporate world years ago, and one of the things that I felt, and one of the things I hear from a lot of people who work in large groups of individuals, which when you work in a corporate environment, you're typically working with large groups of individuals that you're coming in contact with all the time, and that there's this real lack of outlet for people, and, in the work environment,
Mm.
even, and also in parenting, and now being a mom as well, it's like you start to see your own sort of programming on parenting come up, and then your mind says, do I want to keep doing that? Or you like do something and you're like, oh, I can't believe I did that, and I don't want to do that going forward.
Mm.
The learning that takes place, and then also the learning that happens when you hear other parents speak as well. One of the things that I hear a lot on the playground, well, when we used to go to playgrounds, when my child was a little bit younger, probably around the same age as your kid, is that when he would fall, or if a child would fall on the playground, I would hear the parent say, "You're okay."
Mm.
And it was interesting. I started to unpack that statement so much. I actually spoke about it with one of my other podcast guests, because it really bothers me when I see a parent say that to a child, because it sort of assumes that, well, my interpretation of it is that the parent is assuming that if they say that the child is okay, that they'll be able to move on from the event. And yet that is not also coming with the space of allowing whatever they're feeling to flow. It almost
Mm.
feels like "you're okay" is sort of like stopping the energy flow of like, or covering it up. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't necessarily allow that full emotion to express. And I think it's well intentioned on the part of the parent
Yeah.
to want the child to feel good, because they don't want their child's painful, right? To see your kid hurting. It's so
Yeah.
painful. But what are some of the ways in languaging that you've sort of discovered are helpful in moments like that, when the child, for example, hurts herself?
I mean, I think you have to give it space, because I think it's also your relation, like, how's that triggering you, right? Is it to do with your child, or is it more about your relationship to that moment? So, at least with my child, it's like she's right in that tender age of having tantrums pretty much daily. And it's also really interesting to watch her through that process. It's not always easy, of course, because naturally we're human beings as well. But it's that flexibility in her emotional state where she can be 1 minute so happy and blissed out, the next minute literally completely falling apart, and giving the space for her to ride those waves rather than control it. Again, that's easier said than done, but it's really not to edit that part of herself, really to give her that space. And if she's hurt herself, to acknowledge and to honor that that's really difficult, moment for her, not to kind of quickly just move her from it, to shift her into another gear. But that's practice as well. I mean, I'm definitely not perfect in that. I have my moments where maybe I'm falling into that kind of unconscious state of not really honoring that process for her.
Yes, childhood programming always seems to creep up on us when we least
Yeah,
expect it.
absolutely.
It's hard to be a parent, I find. Yeah, it's really hard, but it's like really a journey of, like you're saying, like singing is, or using your voice is really about learning about yourself. And in a
Mm-hmm.
way, I think parenting is the same, of that self study and that being within the whole. And
Yeah,
you were talking earlier about in the workshops that you've been doing with people, we've all been possibly from very well intentioned individuals around us, right?
yeah.
We have sort of allowed our voices to be squashed at certain moments, or we start crying in a environment and we say it's not okay because I'm at work, or I'm supposed to look tough here, or whatever. I think men and women both experience that. Even,
Mm-hmm.
many women feel like they need to be tough as well
Yeah.
in certain situations. And what you were saying earlier about when you see their bodies going through this process and you see their bodies releasing, whether it's laughing or crying, however that energy is being released, because there's, even with crying, for example, there's a fluid that's moving, and there
Mm-hmm.
are, muscular contractions and, heart rate shifts and things like that that are all happening when we cry. And then when our mind interferes and says, no, it's not okay to do that, then there's a physiological shift. And in fact, in Ayurvedic medicine, which is my background, crying is one of the natural urges of the body that you should not stop. It's
Yeah.
like, you have this animal body and there's a bunch of stuff that it does. And when it's doing it, like yawning or sneezing or something, you just let it do that,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't let your mind or your society or whatever get in the way of that. And it would make total sense to me that people would have these incredible releases
Yeah.
doing this work, and that would manifest through crying. And also, I would imagine that people also, I don't know if you're studying this, but I would imagine people's health would improve as well because of the throat and the relationship with the thyroid and
Mm-hmm.
eating and everything. Yeah, I don't know. Has anybody given you feedback on their health improving after doing this work as well?
Yeah, I think with the voice, because it engages every part of your body and your being, it engages your breath, it engages your heart, it softens the mind, it engages the physical body, and it engages the spirit. It's a very holistic tool in that sense. And maybe people who've written to us and they just feel so different in themselves. They feel more connected. They feel lighter. Some people come to us, they're dealing with a lot of depression, or they're going through something quite intense in their life. And through the work that the journey that they went through with us, those things have kind of improved. Maybe they sleep better. That's the wonderful thing, I guess, about the voice work is that it improves your mood. It helps you feel more connected. It releases really challenging emotions. It helps you also receive insights and understandings about maybe how you're dealing with something in your life. Because especially when we're kind of sounding for a long time or going through quite maybe a shamanic kind of journey through the voice, it can really take them into very deep places and put them into kind of an altered state of consciousness where they're able to access other layers of understanding around themselves or how they're dealing with something in their life. It just gives them that clarity. It helps them just to feel quite whole and embracing the resistance as well. So it's also making space for that, not just kind of chasing rainbows and light, right? It's also being with the gunk, being with the harder parts of ourselves. And that's all really carefully facilitated and held a sensitive way. So it's really encouraging people to bring that to the table as well, not just to bring the things that they want or they think people want to hear. It's also the uncomfortable, because it's being whole in that. And again, that's been my journey. It's bringing the uncomfortable to the surface so that it can transcend and that we can kind of move forward without getting too much into the story of it, but just feeling it and bringing it out.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a great way because, like what you said, without getting too caught up in the story of it, that must be really helpful for people. I mean, and why it's different as a healing art than something like talk therapy, which, often makes us go right at an issue and it just almost seems to dig it in deeper.
Yeah, exactly. And that was how it was for me when I did talking therapy. And I don't want to dismiss it, but it just kept me very attached to a narrative. It kept me stuck in a story. Whereas with the voice, it's immediate. You're working with the moment and you're able to kind of detach from the story a little bit that way.
I know you mentioned earlier some things that this kind of work can help people with, but I guess if somebody's listening and they're not sure that they could benefit from something like this, what would be some of the signs that a person would be experiencing in either in their body or in the way that they're interacting with their environment that you would recommend that they explore the animal body and its vocal capacity?
Well, I guess the first thing I really want to kind of make clear is that you don't need to have any previous experience in vocal work. You know, you just bring your voice as it is. I work also one to one a lot with people. So I'm working with many clients that come to me with various different situations. It can be specifically just around the voice and how they feel blocked with their expression, or it could be other things where they're dealing with other physical issues or emotional issues, something in their life. And I would kind of prescribe or suggest certain techniques that would help move through that. Sometimes people just need to come back into their body. You know, they're too much into their minds, or, yeah, so just finding techniques and practices that can just help them drop into that space. So some of it's like improvisation, some of it is quite using the chakra centers and using vowel sounds for each center with a movement. And what I tend to see with my clients is sometimes it's quite big shifts, and sometimes the shifts are really subtle as well. Yeah, and I think this work is really a journey. And in the sense that it's like maybe if you just do it one off, you would obviously experience some benefit from that. But to apply yourself regularly just by sounding, even if you're just kind of sounding in the moment, at least for 5 minutes, and just kind of bringing to the surface whatever it is you're feeling, especially in those kind of harder emotions, and paying note to any kind of energetic shift from that.
And do you do these workshops? Do you do them more than once a year?
Well, we were doing these workshops quite regularly. Naturally, with the whole pandemic, all our kind of physical work has come to a pause at the moment. But we've been doing our work online. When I say we, my husband and myself. So we've been, the last 2 months, we did 2 online workshops. I did one for women, and the one in December was for all genders. And we have one happening this weekend, again for all genders. So we've kind of moved online. And even though I had a lot of resistance in the beginning because we were so, that being in the same room with all these voices was just such a powerful experience. So I had a lot of doubt in the beginning of how this would transcend onto like an online platform. But it's amazing, actually. Naturally, you don't hear everybody's voices as one, but you still get that depth. It's in a different way. And I think people are so hungry for connection, right? And it's just a really beautiful way to come together and to bring yourself. So simple, right? Not trying to, don't need to have experience. You don't need to get it right. If anything, we're always encouraging this kind of, this playfulness and bringing the mistakes, allow yourself to kind of mess it up, whatever that might mean for you, and see if that correlates with anything in your life. You know, is there a pattern that you kind of are starting to unpack from that journey? We do that a lot. We have our 1 week retreats once a year, and this is happening hopefully in September in Greece, in a small island called Armagos. And that's like a really intimate group. So it's like 20 people, 22 people, and then myself and my partner. And it's a 1 week journey. So there's more space. Like naturally, with a workshop, you just get everything in a short space of time. But with a 1 week, there's a lot more space so people can really digest, because things can come up out of the blue. It can bring things to the surface that maybe you weren't expecting. So it's so great to have that moment to kind of digest and rest in between and really take your time. But they all work differently, but beautifully as well, you know.
Well, it's so wonderful to connect with you. And I know that the work that you're doing is very important. I think it's important for all people, especially important for anyone who feels like they want to connect with their voice more. And there are certain times in our lives where we want that more than others. And like you're saying, there's this time that we're all in where we're lacking the connection.
Mm,
So, yeah, it's tricky and it's fascinating to see how a lot of our work has translated online and how we've still gotten these great experiences out of it. Me too. Same thing. I've always touched bodies, in person and evaluated my clients using my, fingers and taking pulses and things like that. And going on to a video call with people has actually been different and sweet in its own ways and help with different aspects of the healing process. So, Nessie, how would you recommend people learn about the work that you're doing if they're interested in doing one of your workshops or even hearing your music?
Thank you so much, Heather. So, if people feel the call and they really want to kind of explore this work, they can visit my website, which is vocalodyssey.com, and it will give a lot of information regarding the work. Or they can write to me personally at info@nessigomesmusic.com. And if you wish to hear the music, I'm on Spotify as well and all kind of major streaming platforms.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It seems like there's so much to the human experience. And like I said earlier, animals just have a way to do things very easily that their intellect doesn't get in the way of.
Yeah,
And I feel like practices like the one you're doing really allow us to reconnect with that primal part of ourselves
yeah.
that modern society sort of strips away more and more as time goes on. So I want to thank you for the work that you're doing. And I can't wait I hope I even have time to take a workshop with you someday. I would love
Yeah.
that.
Well, let me know and you'll be more than welcome to join as our guest.
Oh, that would be wonderful. It's been so wonderful meeting you, Nessie. And
Thank you, Heather.
thank you for being here on The Wisdom of the Body.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrish.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.